All right, my friends. So I'm going to share with you one of my favorite investments. We haven't talked about it for a few, probably 6 or 7 months now. But now we have 2018 numbers. Is pretty interesting to see. I was listening to as I was going down to get my MRI. I was listening to Med Favor's podcast, and this is episode number 83 with Randy Swan. And this is the defined risk strategy portfolio, the Swan defined risk strategy portfolio. In no way am I saying this should be your investment. I have no clue what your circumstances are, but there is a time for active management. Absolutely. And one of the times for active management is when they're doing hedging strategies and basically essentially buying insurance through selling and buying of options and puts and things of that nature, which I don't want to do. You shouldn't want to do it, but you hire a professional to do that for you. And I think there's some benefits here. So let's dive right into this. I think you'll get a lot out of this, actually. I was made aware of the Swan defined risk portfolio about 3 years or so ago. I've heard of hedging, of course. I used to myself dabble a little bit in options, and I got burned, so I said never doing that again. But they do play a role. Whoa, we got a big old wasp running around up there. Yikes, that's not good. All right, let's make sure I don't get stung, because then you see somebody get stung and probably have to call 911. All right, so this is a beautiful day here, by the way. Man, it is just freaking absolutely good. No humidity. I mean, this has got to be a way it's like a San Diego every day. Just absolutely gorgeous. Cool nights, just beautiful day. It's oh man. All right, so this is the Swan Defined Risk Strategy, DRS. Is an actively managed hedged equity rules-based process that is designed to hedge against large stock market declines and provide stable returns over a full market cycle. And that's what they've done, without question. And so what Andy says is always invest, or what Randy said, always invested and always hedged. All right, so I'm a fan of that. And you can see here, since inception, this portfolio has averaged 8.05. The S&P 500 has averaged 7.5, and the Barclays U.S. aggregate has averaged 5. So, since inception, he's beaten both those guys, and the reason is because they didn't get killed in 2001 and 2, and then in 2008. Over the last 5 years, on the other hand, they're getting dwarfed by the S&P 500, only at 4%, where the Barclays bond index is up about 2 3/4. Over the last 10 years, 7.5%, not too shabby. So they're basically one half of the S&P 500 return, but about doubling of the bond return. And I think that's kind of what we're hoping for. And so if you look historically speaking, I just got my eyes over there at those. I'm going to pause this real quick. I'm a live and let live kind of guy, so I'm not one to try to take out a wasp. In fact, I say, look, man, as long as I'm not bothering you, don't bother me, and all is good. So I'm getting away from him. Maybe I'll bring this inside next time. It's such a nice day. All right, so here are the returns of the, and I love this little risk return quadrants. Yeah. So basically, you got the higher the risk, the more to the right. The higher the return, to the more up. So we want to be in this quadrant here if we can, which is the upper left. That means higher return and the lower risk. That's where we want to be. Bonds and CDs will be here. Stocks will generally be up here. The reason for that is higher returns, higher risk. We don't want that. We want higher returns with lower risk. The top left quadrant is what we want. And this goes back to, you can see here, it goes back to 1997 when Randy and the team started. Let me move this guy up right here. So you can see, so if you move this over a little bit here too, right there. So here's a Swan. So 1997 up 19%. So they beat both the S&P 500 and the Barclays in 1998. They beat they beat the Barclays index. 1999, the same thing. 2000, they beat the S&P but not the bonds. 2001, they beat the S&P but not the bonds. 2002, they beat both. 2003, they lost to both, but they only had a 0.65% down year, not too shabby. 2004, they beat both. 2005, they beat both. 2006, they beat both. 2007, they beat both. 2008, they smoked the S&P 500, only down 4.5%, but they did get smoked by bonds. 2009, they beat bonds, but kept up with the S&P 500, but not much. 2010, they beat the bonds, got smoked by the S&P. 2011, they got smoked by both. 2012, they beat the bonds, but again got smoked by the S&P. 2013, same thing. They smoked the bonds, but got smoked by the S&P. 2014, they beat the bonds, got smoked by the S&P. 2015, they lost to both. 2016, they smoked the bonds, but got beat by the S&P. 2017, they got smoked by the S&P, but beat the bonds. 2018, they returned worse in both. So as you can see there, that's a lot of, they beat, I mean, for the most part, they're beating one of the two every single year. And sometimes they're beating it significantly. A couple times they beat both. In fact, more often than they beat both than they got beaten by both the S&P and the bonds. Year to date, they're smoking the bonds, and again, they're getting smoked by the S&P. And that's what I'd actually expect. I expect your bonds will give you 3. Stocks will give you 8, let's just say. This will probably give you 4, all right? 4, I mean, say probably 5, all right? So they'll probably beat the bonds by, a good fraction like what we're seeing here, but they'll probably lose the overall market as a whole. But then look at the risk you're taking on. So the worst we've ever done was 7.74%. That was last year. That's it. So essentially what Randy was saying is that he's using the options to generate an income that can probably outpace that of bonds while we still have equities in the S&P 500. So they're not ever going to get 100% of the upside of the S&P 500. That's just not the way it's going to work. But they are going to generate, they're trying to generate an income stream that would maybe beat that of bonds while also giving some upside of the S&P 500. So I'm a big fan of this kind of stuff. Look, I mean, here, let's go with the 3 things. Invest in equities. Always invest in the S&P 500 Select Spider ETF. So they're always invested in that. Equally weighting the sectors creates a value tilt to the portfolio. That's what, the more value, the better your portfolio should be in the long run. We don't know, but historically, value just means buying at a cheaper share price. Hedging. Why? To mitigate the risk of the bear market. Always invested and always hedged by actively managed long-term put options, otherwise known as LEAPs. Generally 1 to 2 years in expiration. Initially, purchase at or near the money, and then seek additional return. And why? To offset the cost of the hedge. Because every time you're adding an insurance position to your portfolio, it costs you money. Actively manage shorter-term option portfolio utilizing a disciplined, rules-based approach. So the idea here is we want to generate an income from our option spreads that we're doing. They call them straddles, butterflies, all these various collars. And look, I'm not even, that's well beyond my methodology here. I used to know that when I took the Series 7 in 1998. I messed around with it a little bit up until 2000. I haven't touched it since. So don't ask me about options. That's just well beyond my pay grade for now. But essentially, they're hedging the equities to make sure that they never get crunched. That, again, we can't guarantee anything. But again, 2008, they were down 4.5. 2001, they're up. 2002, they're up. It's 2003 that they got down a little bit. 2001 and 2, they made money. 2003, they lost a little bit. 2008, they lost 4.5%. A lot of people would take that 100%. The worst they've ever done was last year, down 7 3/4. That's not so bad when you factor in the overall performance has been better than the S&P 500 since 1997, simply because they've minimized it down without question. Over 5 years, nothing to write home about. The S&P 500 is up 10.91. These guys are up 4, but still better than bonds for sure. The last 3 years, they more than almost tripled bonds, and of course, they're getting almost tripled, a third of the S&P 500. But that's kind of the risk return. When the S&P 500 defaults again, crashes big time, I have a sneaky suspicion this will be a good place to park some money. Well, you don't want to park it at that point. You want to park it before that. So listen to Matt Favor's podcast interview with Randy. I think you'll get a lot out of that. And I'm still a big fan of this. Again, not saying you should buy it, but I do think there is a place for some active management, and this would be one of those places. All right, we'll see you next time.